Hey everyone, today we're looking at perks that fell from grace. I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the perks that were once the best of the best, but now are just kind of okay, or slightly above average. Many of these are perks that were altered in the recent 6.1.0 perk nerf. We're going to cover 4 perks for each side. We're discussing perks that were once the top of the top, but now are far worse. Maybe not dreadful, but a shadow of their former selves. In some cases, this being a good thing, in others, bad. Let's get into it. Hex Ruin is maybe the most well-known good killer perk, being one of the most popular choices throughout Dead by Daylight history. It was only recently in patch 6.1.0 when it was nerfed quite considerably, reducing it from a 200% regression to a 100%, which is the same regression gained after a gen kick, which is like nothing. As a hex, this makes the perk pretty awful, with a whole lot of other better choices with more consistent options. Also now, if any survivor dies, the perk straight up deactivates. Even if you're lucky enough for it to last that long, it just dips. When it was the higher percentage, it didn't have this downside, and also the risk of the hex was worth it. Often even having it up for a few minutes with 200% could do wonders, and it was great on literally every killer, but now it's just so meh. It was originally changed to its 200% state in 3.5.0. and prior to that was an entirely different perk, and also very powerful. Originally it gave special red skill checks that would regress the generator by 5% if the good part was hit, and 0% if the great was hit. Basically you had to hit the great or the gen regressed. It was a great perk, and widely used. So Ruin is maybe the clearest case of a perk's slow demise and fall from grace, from it being the best in 2 instances, and now just being so average, I suppose. Iron Will is a perk that I think for a long time kind of flew under the radar when it came to just how good it was. In its current version, it will lower your grunts of pain by 75%, which isn't awful or anything. It's just like a half measure. It's not good enough to guarantee your safety, but it's not enough to call it useless either. Iron Will was another perk hit by 6.1.0, where after 4 years, the 100% reduction to grunts of pain became 75%. The long-lived 2.3.0 version was at least better than the original 1.0.0 version, which also reduced grunts of pain by 100%, but only when standing still, which is a strange requirement. So I suppose this perk has had kind of an up and down fluctuation in reality. I think one of the key nerfs to it though in 6.1.0 was the addition of it not working when exhausted. This changes it quite a bit, allowing it to be a far less powerful combo with a perk like Dead Hard, and in general just have less synergy. It feels like this unnecessary jab to a perk that's kind of lost its whole thing anyway. If a killer has a headset, they'll probably hear you with 75% Iron Will, but of course they couldn't with 100%, which was partly why it was so good. The only time 75% actually kind of makes a difference is when you're in a locker, where you're pretty much silent, but that's hardly powerful. Hex Undying I actually think is a really interesting case, with it becoming bad as a result of other things becoming bad, and the general climate of Hex dominance being shifted. The perk itself is still really good, but at one point I would have considered it the best killer perk in the game. Now it's like pretty mid, I would say. Undying's current state allows a Hex totem to have 2 lives essentially. When one is broken, another appears. You also get a small aura effect when survivors go near totems. Original PTB Undying allowed the perk to have unlimited lives, I believe, or up to 4 for the 4 other totems. It came to life in 4.2.0 in a slightly neutered state. It was essentially luck-based, and you had to break the Undying totem, or the other hex or hexes would just continue moving. It was kind of crazy. Again, Undying hasn't necessarily changed much since its initial nerf, or gotten that weak, but because it's a perk that so heavily relies on the strength of other hexes, I personally think it's fallen a great degree, particularly from its PTB state. Ruin Undying was typically the combo, which isn't worth it anymore. Perk slots are far more valuable now, and using Undying to strengthen another hex can often actually be an unwise move. Dead Hard is still very strong, but it's fallen quite the distance I think, and the numbers back its fall too. Bear in mind when I mention this perk, I don't think it necessarily is bad now, but it is undoubtedly worse than before. This is one of very few perks on here I am unbelievably happy got nerfed into the ground. I was an avid hater of Dead Hard, and I always disliked that it allowed such easy and such strong counterplay at the click of a button. One of the only benefits Dead Hard used to have was that it provided counterplay to uncounterable killers like Nurse, for example. With it gone from the game, it's one less tool to use against her. Dead Hard was hit in the 6.1.0 update, where it had been unchanged for 5 years, since 1.6.0, and pretty much peak meta throughout that whole time. Originally it allowed a simple ignoring of damage. You'd boost forward and flat out ignore any damage, no matter the source, so it could be used to counter nearly everything, and also just used for distance mid-chase. It was so strong that killers would reactively wait for survivors to Dead Hard, on the assumption they would have it, which I've noticed they don't really do anymore, because why wouldn't you run something that good? It was the killer equivalent of ruin checking gens. Nowadays it barely boosts you forward, making extra distance kind of obsolete mid-chase, and now you also only get a 0.5 second window of the endurance effect instead of invulnerability. This makes the perk actually take some skill, and precise timing. Again, not bad now, but a perk that after reigning for so long has finally been toppled, a little bit at least. Thanatophobia is an interesting perk, and one I wouldn't say was ever top tier, but definitely a very strong perk. Its original 1.0.0 version applied a progressive reduction to action speeds, depending on how many survivors were injured, scaling from 6% to 15%, and applying to heals, gens, and sabotage speeds. It then became a stacking 4% reduction perk, up to a maximum of 16%. In 2.6.0, so a buff really. A big nerf came in 4.3.0, where it was moved up to 5% for each survivor, but removed the reduced healing aspect of the perk, making it purely gen slowdown. This was initially hit back on quite hard, but the perk was still very solid, particularly on the killers who could injure quickly, and also because there was plenty to stack it with too. Then in 6.1.0 it was altered again, buffed up to 5.5% to a maximum of 22%. This was short-lived however, with 6.1.2 reducing this to a minuscule 2% per survivor injured. The trade-off being that when all survivors were injured, you gained an extra 12% reduction. Basically everyone has to be injured for the perk to take any real effect. This pretty much killed it, as it's no longer really universal as a consistent solid slowdown. But instead is going to buy you maybe a few seconds. Mettle of Man is one of the older perks that I wanted to mention, which had a very short period of being strong. At release in 2.6.3, its activation requirement was simply getting hit 3 times. Once active, you would ignore the next hit completely. This meant it activated pretty much every game without fault, and was a free extra hit without doing anything really. So this perk was really good actually. In 3.0.0, it was realized as an issue, and altered to instead be 3 protection hits, which completely changed how the perk activated and functioned, making it almost instantaneously obsolete from a point of essentially being meta. This is maybe one of the most considerable instant shifts in power even, a case where a perk went from the top of the top to the bottom of the bottom. Protection hits really suck to get, requiring you to run in front of another person and take the hit for them. It was briefly revised to 2 hits in 6.1.2, but quickly changed back in 6.2.0. Truly one of the sadder perk outcomes, I think. Tinkerer has actually got a really interesting history, being an entirely different perk at one point, and honestly being good in both of its instances, with it ending in its current meh state. Tinkerer's original state made charge time add-ons 15% more effective for your killer's power, allowing crazy things like super speed charge-ups for Billy's chainsaw, for example. This was lowered by 5% in 1.3.0, and I think it was partly down to Huntress and her insanely fast hatchet wind-ups. I'm not 100% on that, but I think that was a factor. In 2.1.0, Tinkerer was changed to its familiar state, applying undetectable whenever a generator reached 85% completion for 12 seconds, which was okay. Then in 4.1.0, this was buffed greatly to 70% and 16 seconds. During this time, the perk would activate multiple times for one generator, if you kept regressing it below the trigger point, making it really strong. The big nerf came in 6.1.0, with it only activating once per gen, which I feel really killed the perk. Maybe rightly so, but now it just doesn't work anywhere near as well, particularly for things like 3 gens. In its prime, or either of its primes really, because it had like 2, Tinkerer could be a game changer. Now it's like a maybe game changer with some very specific conditions and a bit of luck, so definitely a fall from grace. Balance Landing is a perk I want to mention. This may seem like an odd pick, but it's a perk that really frustrates me, and has done for a while now. Even in newly released maps, the main building is the only place you can ever really use this perk, and that's kind of a problem, because it's so restrictive. On Shelter Woods, I think the literal only place you can use it is on the basement stairs, which is a pretty bad place to use it as is, making it really bad as the only available spot. I also find in general that the perk has some trouble working on some smaller drops, where it feels like it should work. I don't exactly have any proof on that one, it's purely speculative on my part, but that's what it feels like. Lots of places that feel as if they should proc the perk, but then they don't. Maybe that's just my experience. I would debate one of the main things Balanced has going for it now is that it can be pretty unexpected. One of the main reasons I think this perk has weakened over time though is just the lack of maps with good spots really. I don't know the exact patch, but what took this perk from being genuinely amazing to just average in moments was the alteration of the anti-stagger effect after falling. I don't remember the exact patch, I think 1.5.0, but essentially even when exhausted you would still gain the benefit of Balance Landing's anti-stagger, letting you fall from heights and run straight away, making it really strong when paired up with perks like Dead Hard or Sprint Burst even. Double exhaustion perks was a viable strategy, and a very powerful one. This may seem so petty, but combined with DBD's older maps, with stronger loops like Haddonfield's, this made infinites into like giga infinites. So as it is now, I just feel kind of sad I guess. It feels like it could be so much more, but is let down by current map design and its stagger changes. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know if there's any perks you would add to this list that I didn't mention, as I'm sure there's something I've forgotten. Thanks, and goodbye.